found it humiliating that this South Africa, which is characterized as a middle-income country, could be subjected to the type of unrest where poor people were thronging to the stores looking for food, looking for whatever goods they could get. So that too was an act of humiliation for us.
President Cyril Ramaphosa before the South African Human Rights Commission. The president's first term has been marred with challenges from the state capture inquiry, the deadly COVID-19 pandemic, and last year's July unrest. Ramaphosa says it was a humiliation and a sad reality to see the country in that state of chaos. He says instigators took advantage of the challenges that South Africans are facing.
The instigators want to exploit their vulnerabilities. They then go and open up all these stores, and our people, because they are vulnerable, they are poor, then throng to these stores, and that in itself manifests itself in their humiliation. So they participate in their own humiliation because they cannot help it, because they are caught up in this maelstrom of poverty and inequality.
The president testified that after the looting, he was troubled to see police officers going into people's homes to remove some of the looted goods and destroying them.
And I was troubled when I saw how they were going like from house to house, searching, finding bags of mealie meal, rice, oil, cooking oil and all that, and taking them out and even seeking to arrest some of the people. That troubled me.
Earlier, he corroborated Police Minister Bheki Cele's testimony that they didn't receive any intelligence report.
I am yet to see such a report that says this is what we knew, how it was going to unfold. I have not seen such a report myself, because it would have had to say, these are the planners, this is what they intend to hit, they will move from this mall to the next mall, and all that. Now, that was not forthcoming.
Ramaphosa says government regrets what happened and has reaffirmed his position that the riots were well planned.
We are not a failed state yet and will not get there. We are not a failing state because we are rebuilding the capacity of the state.
The president concluded his testimony by apologizing to the nation and declaring that the July 2021 riots should never happen again. He says the riots were not only an assault on democracy but on people's rights to freedom and security. Ntlantla Khatlane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Mpumelelo Zikalala with Zikalala Attorneys, and who's also a legal analyst, joins us now. Good evening to you and welcome. You know, you heard the words there in that package. July riots were a betrayal of South Africa by South Africans. It was a humiliation. It took advantage of our vulnerabilities. This is an investigative panel. Do you think that we heard enough that shifted the needle on the detail of what we know about why this happened and who's responsible?
Not necessarily. Maybe we're still getting there, but what it does show us currently is that there's someone who didn't do their job. Now, if you focus or zoom in on the president, just remember that his duties are handled or are dictated to by our constitution. If you focus on section 83 to 85 of our constitution, it's very clear as to what the president ought to do. The president is the head of the state. He is in charge of making sure that all the ministers, including the Ministry of Intelligence, works optimally, which at this particular stage should have acted or ought to have known that something such as this one was going to happen. And even if that particular ministry had failed, the Ministry of Police was supposed to be on board and be able to say, here is how we are going to defend members of the public. Here's how we're going to defend the taxpayers in terms of the protection of property, the protection of their livelihoods. We can't run away from the fact that people lost their lives, people lost their employment, and certain businesses lost the places in which they trade. All which we wake up with the hope of saying that we have a president and a government which is going to be able to protect us. Now, when we hear the head of the state saying that we failed, it begs the question of saying maybe shouldn't we pursue this particular matter legally and say we want to sue for your failure to act, your delegation of duties, we have suffered due to your negligence, and we want to be compensated.
Well, let's just home in on that for a moment around the responsibility that lies on his shoulders as head of state as described by the Constitution. Would you just tease out that theme that you just talked about now a little bit more? And what can citizens then actively do against the backdrop of how you've described how the president's responded?
The citizens will then go and say, Mr. President, we have suffered due to your lack of not being able to manage your executive or not being able to manage your ministry properly. Now, if you wake up in the morning and you're being told that there are riots which are taking place in 2 provinces, probably between 3 or 4 hours during that particular point in time, it should already occur in your mind that something wrong is happening. You should activate all your intelligence sources to come and tell you what exactly is happening. And then you deal with the responses there too. Now, if the responses are not there, due to the police not being adequately trained or being prepared to deal with such, then the focus would move to the ministry and say, Police Ministry, did you train for these particular instances? Did you fail to act in a manner in which you ought to have failed? If that's the case, then what sort of damages did we suffer as ordinary citizens of South Africa? If we have suffered any financial damages, then we have a right to come back to the state and say, State, please compensate us, put us in a position that would have been had the riots not have taken place. Because if you had a proper functioning intelligence agency, if you have the proper functioning police ministry, all these particular instances would have been prevented. Even if there would have been riots of which we have experienced a number of strikes in South Africa, they would have been able to be contained and everything would have gone on in a normal way. We wouldn't have this type of destruction that we are in. But for now, what the president is saying indirectly, saying that we have failed in our duties, I don't have an answer to tell you how that particular process took place. And for me, it opens a bit of a loophole when it comes to civil litigation that may come, especially for those individuals that suffered financially. They've got properties that were burned down, stock that was looted, and all those particular things. Someone needs to pay them at the end of the day.
Right. I mean, that's quite a serious loophole that you mentioned there, and I'm so sure a lot of people who were directly and indirectly affected will be paying close attention to that. Let's go then, Mpumelelo, to some of the mixed messages that we keep hearing. We hear about there being good quality reports, the president says, from the SSA, and on the other hand, he describes these attacks as coming out as a bolt from the blue. Mixed messages with the previous minister, Yanda Dlodlo, saying that the president was unreachable to receive reports from her. He says, there were ways that you could reach me, and now at this stage is talking about creating a formal structure to receive reports. This is, if you look at the definition of treason, the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill or overthrow the sovereign or government. And you look at these statements that were made by the president previously, that the events of July were nothing less than a deliberate, coordinated and well-planned attack on our democracy. It certainly seems treasonable, but we're caught in a situation where we don't have enough intelligence either to preempt or either now to be able to show decisively that we know where this is coming from and we know what needs to happen next by way of actually arresting people.
In fact, that is what the president should have answered during this particular session in terms of assuring South African citizens, in terms of saying, we know where we went wrong, we know where our shortfall lies. We have been able to fix that by making sure that the line of communication between the intelligence and I have been sorted out. They're able to speak to me on a daily basis. Linked to that is the process of saying we've been able to find the culprits. If you go into our courts, the National Prosecuting Authority is busy prosecuting these particular matters. Now, I stand corrected on this particular point, but I am yet to see maybe 2 or 3 individuals who are going to be convicted as instigators of this particular riot. I'm yet to see people who are going to be convicted that actually participated in the grand scale looting that actually took place. But most importantly is a system of saying, how are you fixing this particular problem so that you are not faced with the same issue in the near future? can you put us into confidence, Mr. President, that we are not going to suffer the same riots again whenever there's an unfavorable decision that has been taken either by our courts or by our government? That particular admission indirectly of saying we have failed to act in a manner that we should have acted in, linked with the point that there are specific duties that are liable or are supposed to be linked to the president as per our constitution. To me, it proves that the president has said, yes, I'm guilty in this particular point. I partially failed in my duties, but most importantly, he is not telling us how that particular shortfall is going to be fixed.
And to that point, Mpumelelo, if you have to synthesize some of the actions that the president is promising will be taken, I mean, what does it boil down to for you? I mean, I could only count, the coming up of a formal structure to receive these intelligence reports, rebuilding the capacity of the state. Not quite sure what that means yet. As you say, it's early days. Maybe there'll be some detail a little bit later. But given that the so-called masterminds of July last year remain elusive, against the fact that we don't quite know how government's going to, fix the areas where it was found wanting, this in all likelihood could be an event that we see happen again, possibly worse than last time round.
It could be worrying. We are 6 months down the line and we don't know who the instigators are. We are 6 months down the line when we don't know how to put preventative measures so that these type of incidents don't happen again. 6 months down the line, we don't have accurate details of how actually people died. We don't even know those who were shot, which is a worrying situation because it then proves that there's an element of murder here and there. Now, if we don't know all these things, then we beg the question, what type of investigation processes are we engaging in? Are we moving fast enough so that at the end of the day, we're able to see telltale lines so that if this particular issue would be raised again, maybe the next month or so, it would be easy for us to identify them. But it mostly linked to the performance of our law enforcement agencies. Linked with that is the National Prosecuting Authority. At the end of the day, in order for members of South Africa to have full confidence in the law, they need to see that the policemen are arresting individuals, the NPA is successfully prosecuting in those particular individuals, and they're getting the maximum punishment that they're supposed to get. If we're happy with those, then we can say we have a fully functioning government that truly takes care of our needs and our interests as members of the community.
Thank you so much. The views there of Mpumelelo Zikalala, legal analyst from Zikalala Attorneys.